You just got a raise. The email from HR is sitting in your inbox, and for a fleeting second, you feel that rush of victory. You did it. You climbed the ladder. But then you look at your bank account 3 months later and realize something terrifying. Your life feels exactly the same. Or worse, it feels tighter. You are earning more money today than you were 5 years ago, yet you are struggling more than ever to get ahead. I am here to tell you that you are not crazy. You are not necessarily mismanaging your money, and you are not just imagining things. This is not a matter of opinion or a lack of discipline. It is a matter of mathematics. Over the last decade, millions of professionals have been hit by a phenomenon that economists call the money illusion. We are going to look at the cold, hard data from 2014 to 2024 to show you why your salary increase was likely a pay cut in disguise. We are going to strip away the emotions and look at the real purchasing power numbers. Because if you do not understand the math of the last 10 years, you are going to keep running on a treadmill that is slowly moving backward. Before we dive into the decade-long datasets, we need to get our vocabulary straight. If you want to survive the next 10 years, you have to stop thinking in terms of nominal wages. Nominal wages are just the numbers printed on your paycheck. They look pretty, but they are hollow. What actually matters is your real wage. That is, your income adjusted for the cost of existing. If your boss gives you a 5% raise, but the price of your rent, gas, and groceries goes up by 7%, you just took a 2% pay cut. You have more paper, but less power. I spend a lot of time looking at these spreadsheets because the math never lies, even when our brains want it to. If you find this kind of deep dive financial logic helpful, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button. It is the best return on investment you will get today, and it helps me keep the lights on so I can keep running these numbers for you. In this breakdown, we are going to look at the Goldilocks era of the mid-2010s and compare it to the inflationary shock we have all lived through recently. We are going to see exactly where your purchasing power went, and, more importantly, how you can start clawing it back. Let us step back into the time machine to 2014. For about 5 years, the US economy was in what economists call the Goldilocks zone. Inflation was low, hovering around 1.5% to 2%. During this time, if you were a solid performer and got a 3.5% raise, you actually felt it. Why? Because the math worked in your favour. 3.5% nominal growth minus 2% inflation left you with a 1.5% increase in real wealth. You were actually getting ahead, even if it was slowly. This period conditioned our brains to believe that a 3% raise was the gold standard for success. We grew comfortable. We started to trust that as long as the number on the paycheck went up, our standard of living would follow. But this was the setup for the trap. We became susceptible to the money illusion, which is our psychological tendency to view our wealth in nominal dollar terms, rather than recognizing what those dollars can actually buy. We were winning the game back then, but the rules of the game were about to be rewritten by global events. From 2014 to 2019, your purchasing power was expanding. You could buy a little more house, a slightly better car, and still have a bit left over for the retirement fund. It felt like progress because it was progress. But as we all know, the world changed in 2020, and the math of your salary changed with it. Then came the inflationary spike of 2021 and 2022. This is where the money illusion turned from a psychological quirk into a financial disaster. In 2022, inflation peaked at over 9% in the summer, averaging out around 8% for the year. Now, imagine you were a high achiever that year. Your company, wanting to keep you happy, gave you a massive 5% raise. In any other year, you would be popping champagne. But let us run the 2022 math. 5% nominal raise minus 8% inflation equals a 3% real wage cut. You worked harder, you got promoted, you got the raise, and yet you were 3% poorer than you were the year before. This is the moment when the disconnect between your bank account and your feelings started to widen. You saw more money coming in, but you felt more stress. And here is the kicker that the media often glosses over. Even as inflation has cooled down to around 3% recently, that does not mean prices are going down. Disinflation is not deflation. When you hear that inflation is down to 3%, it means prices are still rising by another 3% on top of the massive 16% cumulative increase we already swallowed in the previous 2 years. The prices have leveled off at a new, much higher plateau, while many of our salaries are still trying to find the base of the mountain. If your salary did not jump by at least 32% between 2014 and 2024, you are mathematically behind where you started a decade ago. The reason this feels so painful is that our brains are not wired to calculate compounding inflation in real time. We see the $80,000 salary on the screen and compare it to the $60,000 we made 10 years ago, and our ego tells us we are winning. But your biological hard drive recognizes the truth every time you swipe your card at the grocery store or look at a listing for a home in your neighborhood. You feel a sense of financial vertigo. You are doing everything right, but the ground is shifting beneath you. This is the psychology of the treadmill. You are running faster, but you are not moving forward. Economists call this the money illusion, because the nominal numbers act as a veil, hiding the erosion of your life's work. It creates a sense of quiet desperation because you cannot point to a single failure that caused your struggle. You did not blow it all on a midlife crisis car or a gambling habit. You just existed while the value of your currency diluted. This psychological weight is real, and it leads to burnout. You start to ask, what is the point of the extra hours and the stress if my lifestyle never actually improves? To break this cycle, we have to look at the specific costs that make up your life. Because while the general inflation rate is one thing, the inflation of the things you actually need to survive is something else entirely. We need to look at the core 4 expenses that define the professional class budget. Wait, before we get into the breakdown of housing and cars, I have to warn you about a mistake most people make right here. They assume that if they just wait it out, things will go back to normal. They think the math will correct itself. But that is the trap. Most people stop their analysis here, accept their 3% raise, and unknowingly lose $50,000 in potential wealth over the next 5 years. I am going to show you the step they miss, but first we have to look at the actual damage done to the median American budget. If you think the general inflation rate of 32% over a decade is bad, you haven't seen what happened to the cost of actually putting a roof over your head. We are about to look at the core 4: housing, transportation, food, and healthcare. This is where the real wage theft is happening. It is not happening in the price of flat-screen TVs or clothing, which have actually stayed relatively cheap. It is happening in the non-negotiables. If you have been feeling like you are being squeezed, the next few minutes are going to explain exactly why. We are going to run the numbers on a hypothetical professional named Alex to see how a seemingly great career can still lead to a financial dead end if you do not know how to fight back. Let us look at the case of Alex. In 2014, Alex was making $60,000. He was a great employee, stayed loyal to his company, and received a standard 3% raise every single year for a decade. By 2024, Alex's salary had grown to $80,635. To Alex, this feels like a triumph. He broke the $80,000 barrier. He is making $20,000 more than he was when he started. But when we apply the cumulative inflation of 32%, we see that to have the exact same purchasing power he had in 2014, Alex needs to be making $79,200. On paper, Alex has beaten inflation by a measly $1,400 over 10 years. That is about $100 a month in real gains after a decade of hard work. But it gets worse. Alex's personal inflation rate is likely much higher than the average CPI, because Alex has to pay for the core 4. Let us start with housing. In 2014, the median home price was around $275,000. Today, it is over $420,000. But the price of the house is only the beginning. In 2014, Alex could get a mortgage at 4%. Today, he is looking at closer to 7%. When you do the monthly payment math, the cost to finance the median American home has increased by over 100% in 1 decade. Alex's salary went up by 34%, but his primary cost of living doubled. This is why Alex feels like he is failing. He is earning more, but he can afford half as much house as he could 10 years ago. His raise was obliterated before he even signed the mortgage papers. Now, seeing these numbers can be overwhelming. It is easy to get lost in the spreadsheets and feel like there is no way out. That is exactly why I built the Tom Talks Money digital templates. If you want to run these exact calculations for your own life, I have created the ultimate personal finance dashboard and a monthly budget planner that do the heavy lifting for you. These are the exact mathematical systems I use to track real wage growth and ensure I am not falling for the money illusion. You can plug in your own numbers, see your personal inflation rate, and track your debt payoff with the systems that actually account for the reality of 2024. You can find the link to these tools in the description below. They are designed to give you the data you need to take to your boss or to use when planning your next career move. We are going to get to the exact portfolio allocation and negotiation scripts in a minute. But first, we need to fix the leak in your budget by understanding the rest of the core 4. Because housing was just the first blow. Next, we have to talk about how the car in your driveway is eating your raise. Transportation is the second largest drain on the professional budget, and the math here has become hostile. In 2014, the average new car was $32,000. Today, it is $47,000. That is a 47% increase. But just like housing, the interest rates have made this a crisis. A car loan that cost $575 a month in 2014 now costs $930 for the exact same class of vehicle. That is a 61% increase in your monthly transportation cost. If you are following along, Alex's 34% raise is already gone. And we haven't even gone to the grocery store yet. Between 2019 and 2023 alone, grocery prices spiked by 25%. Over the full decade, it is closer to 40%. For a family of 4, that means spending an extra $4,000 a year just to eat the exact same calories. This is after-tax money, which brings us to the most insidious part of this entire phenomenon: bracket creep. As your nominal salary goes up to $80,000, you are being pushed into higher tax brackets. Even though your money buys less, the government wants a bigger percentage of it. When Alex gets a $4,000 raise, he doesn't keep $4,000. Taxes, including Social Security and Medicare, take about 35% of that increase. After inflation is accounted for, Alex is actually poorer at the end of the year after getting a raise than he was at the start of the year. This is the hidden tax on inflation. You are being penalized for the very raises that are failing to keep you afloat. You are paying for the privilege of losing purchasing power. It is a mathematical trap that most people do not even realize they are in until they try to save for retirement and realize the numbers do not add up. This leads us to how inflation impacts your capital. You have probably heard of the Rule of 72, which tells you how long it takes for your investments to double. But the Rule of 72 also works in reverse. It tells you how long it takes for the cost of living to cut your savings in half. During the steady 2% inflation era, it took 36 years for your money's power to be halved. But at the 8% peak we saw recently, it only takes 9 years. If you have $15,000 sitting in a basic savings account as an emergency fund, that balance might look the same as it did in 2014, but its utility has been slashed. To buy the same amount of emergency goods today, that fund needs to be $20,000. Your safety net has holes in it, and that is why you feel a constant, low-level financial anxiety. Your brain knows that $15,000 does not go as far as it used to, even if the number in the app hasn't changed. This is the erosion of your past labor. Not only is your current work being devalued by real wage cuts, but your previous work, stored as cash, is being liquidated by the macroeconomy. To stop this, we have to look at why companies do this. They are not necessarily evil, but they are playing a different mathematical game than you are. They use a metric called the cost of labor, while you are living the cost of living. These two numbers have moved in completely different directions over the last decade, and understanding that gap is the key to your escape. Conventional wisdom tells you that loyalty pays off, but the math of the last decade says the opposite. Data from the Federal Reserve shows that job switchers consistently see higher wage growth than those who stay. In 2022, switchers saw nearly 8% growth, while stayers saw 5%. By staying at your job for 5 years with 3% raises, you are essentially volunteering for a demotion in purchasing power. Corporations know about the money illusion. They know that a 4% raise sounds good to most people, even if it is a real-world cut. They are managing their margins, and you are the margin. This is why you must stop viewing your salary in nominal terms and start treating yourself like a business. A business would never accept a contract that loses money every year due to rising costs. So why should you? This is where we move into the protocol. How do you actually fix this? It starts with the way you negotiate. You have to stop asking for raises and start asking for wage stabilization plus growth. You need to use the actual CPI data as your baseline. If inflation was 4% and you get a 4% raise, you are not doing better, you are just staying even. You have to learn to own assets that outpace this math. Equities and real estate have historically crushed inflation, even during the last decade. If you rely solely on a W-2 wage, you are playing a rigged game. You must convert your depreciating cash into appreciating assets. The final step in our protocol is to exploit the one benefit of inflation: fixed rate debt. If you locked in a mortgage in 2014, you are paying the bank back with dollars that are worth 32% less today. That is a massive wealth transfer from the lender to you. This is how the wealthy stay wealthy during inflationary periods. They hold assets that rise in value and debt that stays fixed in nominal terms. If you want to join a community of people who are looking at these numbers every day, I invite you to click the join button and become one of the optimizers. Our channel members get priority replies to their comments and custom badges, but more importantly, they are part of a group that values financial literacy over financial myths. We are all trying to escape the money illusion together. To wrap this up, remember that a salary of $60,000 in 2014 requires nearly $80,000 today just to tread water. If your bank account feels stagnant, it is not a psychological trick. It is a mathematical certainty. But now that you have the data, you can stop being a victim of the math and start being the architect of it. Go look at your numbers, use the tools in the description, and don't let another year go by where your raise feels like a pay cut. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you run your personal inflation rate lately? What was the one expense that surprised you the most? Let us get a peer review going in the discussion below. I am Tom, and this is Tom Talks Money. I will see you in the next one.